Welcome to Village Church. My name is Zach. I'm the online pastor here at Village, and we are so glad that you are here. And if you are new, a special welcome to you. Now, we know that this past year and a half has been unlike anything we have experienced. And in anticipation of that, we have a new fall series, and it is unlike anything you have experienced. Pastor Mark breaks down concepts that you have never heard before. So, take a sneak peek at what's to come.
If you look at Leonardo da Vinci's painting, The Last Supper, you'll see a series of bread rolls that run across the center of the painting. A few years ago, a musician found that by drawing the 5 lines of a musical staff across the painting, the bread rolls combined with the apostles' hands lined up to make musical notes. When read from right to left, which was Da Vinci's writing style, the notes combined to make a 40-second composition, literally a song. Even disbelievers have admitted that the composition's perfect harmony is too good to be a coincidence. Da Vinci was an expert musician as well as a painter, so he knew what he was doing. A song, hidden in plain sight. What is the thing we all want more than anything? What's behind almost every choice you make? Every moment, 1,000 times a day, every day. What's the thing we all are searching for? It's been called a lot of things across time, but we call it happiness, joy, pleasure. Our own joy is literally the thing that drives all other things. Our choices, our friendships, our work, our hobbies, our values, virtues, obsessions, sins, what we do with our time, our talent, our treasure, all of it is driven and shaped by this one search. This isn't a new thought, of course. Philosophers and storytellers and scientists and psychologists and sociologists, they've been telling us this for years. The clothes you're wearing right now, that man you married, that meal you just had or are dreaming about cooking up next. Sure, sometimes we just make do and get stuff done, but most often, even in those moments, we try in some way to enjoy those things. Happiness, it drives everything. It's what it means to be human from the cradle to the grave. None of this is all that debated. Where all this gets interesting is the ways we try to be happy, the ways we try to find the joy that we're all looking for. The answer to where it's all found, the keys to happiness, is exactly what we've been trying to answer since we were drawing on walls and tracing the stars. So where is this happiness found? How can I experience it? What is the secret? How do I get it and keep it once I've found it? See, we tend to look everywhere to find it. Money, sex, fame, power, friendship, family, kids, work, accomplishment, adventure, intelligence, reputation, beauty. But what if I told you that that was all wrong? That all these years we've been looking in the wrong places, to the wrong things, not to things that help, but actually end up harming us. What if I told you that the secret was none of that, but that the secret wasn't all that secret at all, that it's been right in front of our noses the whole time, like a painting, thousands of years old, sitting in a gallery for all to see, famous beyond words, with a hidden message hiding in plain sight when we look closer, when we know what to look for, when we stare into it, for those who have eyes to see it. A secret which invites the world. Come closer, look, and truly live. You see, God told us 2,000 years ago the what, the why, and the how of happiness. 9 unbelievable keys to what we've all been looking for our entire lives. We've missed them, but it's time to discover them.
This is going to be an unbelievable series of messages from Pastor Mark. You are not going to want to miss this. 5 weeks starting September 26th. Now, let's continue our service and worship together.
You Why me? I thought I've been obedient to you. I thought I've done quote unquote all the right things. Like, why did this happen to me? I went up for a layup and I got hit in the air. I came down really hard and hit the ground. My kneecap actually ended up popping out. And then I went up for a block and I came down and landed on someone's foot and my knee popped out again. So I had to do even more rehab. I think my leg was just tired and my knee gave out on me for a third time again then. And in that fall, I ended up landing on my arm. I knew something was off in my arm because it had like this tingling sensation. It just wouldn't go away. I had torn my tricep and UCL, which are like two major ligaments. There was like nothing holding onto my kneecap besides my quad. So those basically required immediate surgery. I was feeling pretty alone, and why is this happening to me? I've grown up in a Christian household and just have always been told that God has a plan in everything. But when you're in the midst of all of it, it's so hard to see, especially when things just keep happening one after the next after the next. It felt like pretty defeating, especially when I'd re-injure myself after all the work I put in. I was basically bedbound for a month during the summer. Before all of this, basketball was truly my identity. And then as soon as it was taken away from me, it felt like I had nothing left. I've always been told, like, you need to make sure that you make your faith your own, like it's not my parents' faith. Through this, it's really opened my eyes to how I should have that personal relationship with God.
Taylor shines for Jesus. She wants to point to Jesus all the time. Through this experience, she really has not leaned on her own strength or on her parents. She's really learned how to lean on her own relationship with Jesus.
I may have a plan or trajectory of where I'd want to go, but God will ultimately put me on the right path and lead me to places where I can show Him the most glory through whatever I'm doing, whether that's school, basketball, just being a friend to others. I was told by many people that I would never be able to play basketball again, so the fact that I am able to is such a miracle in and of itself. And I just know that God wants me to use my gifts for His glory.
Sing, let the King, and let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, He is my song. And let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, He is my song. 'Cause you are good, good.
gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, no, no. You're never gonna let me down. Jesus. You're never gonna let me down. No, no, no. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down.
'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good.
You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. No, no, no. You're never gonna let me down. Jesus. You're never gonna let me
You are good, you're
Welcome to Village Church. My name is Chris. I'm one of the lead pastors here at Village Church, and I'm so glad you're joining us today as we continue in our study of the book of John. This is a book that confronts us in so many ways, and it's been written with a real distinct purpose to help us understand Jesus more. And you might actually be someone who loves Jesus, is coming to church, is part of Village Church for a long time, but you actually might be someone who's never been in a church before. This might be your first time to Village, sure, but it might also be your first time engaging with the gospel of Jesus and trying to understand even who God is. Is this real? Is this something I should even invest my time in? And thinking this might be the only time you ever come to this service, whether that even be online. This might be the only time you listen to something like this. And I just want to encourage you, this text is actually perfect for you because it's going to confront in us, those of us who don't believe in Jesus and those of us who do believe in Jesus, we're all going to be confronted with the truth of who he is because this is what he done. We're in this place in the text where all of the animosity in Jesus' life surrounding like who he was and who he said to be is growing. It's saying that these people want to actually kill Jesus and put him to death because of who he says he is. He constantly, over and over and over again, doesn't just identify to do good things, which he does, right? He heals the sick. He helps blind people to see. He actually like raises people from the dead. He does all these really good social things. He actually even, you might think this is the great one, he like turns water into wine so a party can keep going. Like these are things that he does. And so it's easy for us to just take those at bay and say, wow, he's a really amazing, incredible, supernatural, good guy. But the reason Jesus is in trouble here and the sake that people want to kill him is because he actually keeps saying that he's God. He keeps putting himself as equal to the God of Israel, the one all of the people in this context know. And in fact, in this passage, the one they're celebrating. They're at this festival of booths. It's this festival where they're celebrating the goodness of God. The goodness of God in this time when they're in the wilderness, how he showed up for them providentially, how he showed his faithfulness, how he guided them, and how he was with them. And yet Jesus here is God incarnate in the flesh with them and trying to tell them who he is, and they're confronting him and wanting to kill him. So that's the status of the text we're in. That's kind of the context where we're at. This festival where there's thousands of people coming from all over the region to this one place, Jerusalem, the cultural hub, the religious hub. And so you see different groups of people. In fact, the passages we just went over last week talk about these people who didn't really know who Jesus was. They're wondering why people are trying to kill him, and they think he has a demon in him. And then today we're going to talk about a different crew of people who know the religion of the time. They are good followers of God. They know his rules, and they've actually, through their study of him, established this understanding of what it would look like for the Messiah to come. So when they're confronted with Jesus, they don't believe it, even though he truly is God. I'm going to read the passages for us. We're starting in verse 25 of chapter 7, and then we're going to go through it verse by verse. So this is just an opportunity for us to really get to know what we're talking about and get into the text a little more, and also then see what that means for us, because there is some really applicable things. So verse 25 starts like this. Some of the people of Jerusalem therefore said, "Is not this the man whom they seek to kill? And here he is speaking openly, and they say nothing to him. Can it be that the authorities really know that this is the Christ? But we know where this man comes from. And when the Christ appears, no one will know where he comes from." So Jesus proclaimed as he taught in the temple, "You know me and you know where I come from, but I've not come of my own accord. He who sent me is true, and him you do not know. I know him, for I come from him, and he sent me." So they were seeking to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. Yet many of the people believed in him. They said, "When the Christ appears, will he do more signs than this man has done?" The Pharisees heard the crowd muttering of these things about him, and the chief priests and the Pharisees sent officers to arrest him. Jesus then said, "I'll be with you a little longer, and then I'm going to him who sent me. You will seek me, and you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come." The Jews said to one another, "Where does man intend to go that we will not find him? Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? What does he mean by saying, 'You will seek me, and you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come'?" And this is the text we're faced with. You can see the drama play out. You can see this moment where Jesus is teaching to the people. And then there's these Pharisees, these religious rulers of the day who are upset about what Jesus is saying, but at first they don't confront him, which causes some turmoil in the hearts of the people watching. And then finally, they have enough of Jesus and they actually want to go and get him and they want to actually arrest him, but he can't be arrested at this moment because his hour has not yet come. And he starts saying these things about where he's going and what this means. So let's dig in. See, in the text here today, it starts off with these people in Jerusalem saying, "Is this not the man whom they seek to kill?" Like this is like we were saying, Jesus is at this space where people want to kill him because of what he's saying, because of who he's saying he is. He's not just a good man doing wild things and doing party tricks and making people believe that he might be something more than just a man who has some sort of special, unique powers. He's actually saying he's God. That's the blasphemous part. That's the scandal of Christ. That's the thing that people cannot get over in the day, is he is saying that he is God and he's doing it in every way possible. And I know some of you struggle with the ideas like, did Jesus actually say he was God? Like that is the reason they seek to kill Jesus, is because he's confessing and saying that he is actually God. And so we have these people in Jerusalem, the people who know, and yet Jesus is speaking openly with authority to them. You see, this is what's interesting, though, about how Jesus is talking. See, here's Jesus speaking openly, and they say nothing to him. Who is the they? The they is the Pharisees, the religious elite, the people who want to kill him. So you have this weird context and structure happening, which is actually changing the hearts of the people around them, changing their understanding, having them question, who is this man Jesus actually? The inactivity of the religious people in the day who are letting Jesus speak openly in the temple, in the religious festival of booths, this one that's here to honor God, is causing the Jewish people of the day to question if he's actually just a man, or if the authorities actually know that he's Jesus. This is so interesting because you can tell that the people of the day knew their faith. So they knew who God was, but they also knew their authorities, and they trusted their authorities even around the matters of God, to a point of saying, like, this is the person that I believe in. They believed their religion more than they believed in the God they worshiped. They followed their religion more than they followed the God that they worshiped. And they're stuck in this place where they had to question, like, is this actually someone more than who we thought it was? And this is where it gets really interesting, because when you look at a text like this, and they're looking to their authorities around the claims of Jesus, this is something I think a lot of us can identify with. If you've been raised in the church, maybe you were raised in a church that's different from Village, because Village tends to be this mixed bag of places. Like when people ask me, like, what kind of denomination is Village as a pastor? Like, Chris, like, what is Village aligned with? It's kind of hard to describe. Like, it's not hard to describe the actual alignment we have, but it's hard to describe the makeup of people who make Village up. Like, I remember, because they come from all different camps. They come from places of really charismatic backgrounds where people are blowing shofars and waving flags. They come from more conservative backgrounds, like myself. I was raised in a Baptist church, quite conservative, and we have people all over the spectrum, which creates some really interesting moments. Like, I remember we went to this one hospital visit, and I brought one of my colleagues with me, and he was raised in a more charismatic background. And so we're here, and we're praying for this guy, and he's in a hospital bed. And at this point, he's actually he's passed out. And so we're praying for him, and we're praying over him. and the door's open. It's like a shared room, right? And so I'm always conscious and thinking through kind of some of the things that like I hold on to because I wasn't a pastor all my life. So I come in a little bit skeptical of what it looks like to be a pastor and what you need to be. And I tend not to try to be overly religious because that's really just not me. And I want an authentic relationship with Jesus first. That's where I want to start. And so I'm in this moment in this room and I'm aware of our surroundings, right? I'm looking around like, okay, there's people in the room here. Maybe something we say will help them as well since this guy can't really hear us. And I start praying. And then my friend, during my prayer, he starts praying, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. We can do this dual thing where we're both praying, and God could hear both of us, right? That's okay. And then he starts speaking in tongues, like in a whole way, like, and if you know what that is, it's like considered to be this way where he's speaking this language that like I can't actually interpret at this point. He's just going off speaking in tongues and singing, and I'm like, okay, that's a little different. I look back, and a nurse stops at the door to make sure everything's okay and nothing bad's happening in the room. And then one of the guys in the hospital bed, like 2 over in the same room, stands up and like raises his hands and walks over and starts speaking in tongues of like a different language. And so now I got these 2 guys like speaking this language I can't like, and if I was to focus just on like the religion of things that are happening, I feel like from my own experience in life, I'd be a little thrown off. I'd be a little concerned. I wouldn't know really what's happening in the space. But because I also knew how much my friend loved Jesus, I can trust that, like, in this moment, Jesus might be doing something outside of my understanding. He might actually be present. And one of the concerns that happens is when you place, like, your understanding of God on the religion that you face, like, that's where you start putting your faith. You start putting your faith in what Mark says on a Sunday. You start putting your faith in the teachers of the day and the things you know, and you don't put your faith in Jesus. And some of us care more about the religion that we're in than the God that this religion is pointing to. Like the things that we care more about the praxis of the faith than we do actually the God that we have faith towards. Like we spend so much time trying to understand our religion and the rules of that religion and the structure and why we do and who we should respect and all the authorities in it. And we don't get to know Jesus in the midst of it. Like this people group is looking at the God of the universe and they're hearing him preach and teach openly in the presence of him being there. And they're asking, like, do the authorities think that this is God? They're not making the decision on their own. You see, my faith growing up was all about my parents' faith. It wasn't until November 5th, 2012, where I questioned it for myself and it became my own. And some of you who are in your 50s and your 60s, some of you in your 70s, some of you who are young, sure, like in your 30s and your 20s, all of us, all over the spectrum, some of us in church who have been here our whole lives may have never had a moment to actually question if Jesus is really the king of the universe, and we've become cultures of like people of our religion and our culture, and that's all we know, and we're fine with it because it's comfortable. Because I promise you, once you start following Jesus, it will get uncomfortable. In the same way, because he calls us to greater things. He wants to transform things in our life. He wants to push us forward. But I want to encourage you, like that will be the most powerful move of your life, to move from what the authorities say, the spiritual leaders in your life, the churches in your life, and move into what Jesus says. Like, can I just give you back something here? Can I just give you some authority? Let's say, I'm just going to speak to the parents in the room for a minute, or anybody who wants to be a parent one day. You are the spiritual leaders of your home. Every single data point that we see, everything, they did a hemorrhaging faith study on why young adults and youth are leaving the church in droves. And it came down to how their parents, the one thing that would keep them aligned with, the one big factor that caused them to think about Jesus, pursue Jesus, fall in love with Jesus, follow Jesus more, was not the religious group they identified with or their parents identified with. It was the real on-the-ground love and care that their parents showed for their own love for Jesus. It's like, it's the real stuff. It's how their parents it wasn't how their parents loved the church and pushed church on their kids and said, hey, you need to go to church and you need to hear what these religious people are saying. It was saying, it's all about how the parents love Jesus. That is the one factor that contributes the most to your kids loving Jesus. And I know that's a desire of a lot of you. But is your desire ultimately about Jesus, or is it about following a religious group? Because this is what the people are caught in. They're not sure what to do with Jesus, and so they look to their religious authorities more than anything else to make and define their life. You see, and it shows that it's more than just the religion, it's other things they've learned. It says, but we know where this man comes from. And when the Christ appears, this is the Messiah, this is the one they're waiting for, the one they're thinking about, this teacher that they're waiting, the salvation for the world, this one that they're actually pursuing, know that God will send to redeem Israel to him. They say no one will know where he comes from. This is like Malachi chapter 3. Like they try and misinterpret verses to say, we don't know where he's going to come from, but we know where this man's from. We know this man's from Bethlehem. In fact, though, Jesus was prophesied to have come from Bethlehem. They say, we don't know how. It's like they're following this superstitious idea of the day where once again, they're putting their faith in other things, in superstition, in religion, but not in this actual proclamation of who God is. You see, it's so interesting because there's so many good things happening here. Like, it's really good that they would study the faith. It's really good that they'd want to follow good leadership. It's really good that they'd want to actually know the ins and outs of how this is, but they're missing the main point. And this is where it's sneaky. Listen to this. John Chrysostom, he was actually like a theologian in like 345 AD. He was known as the golden-mouthed theologian because he was so good at articulating truths about the gospel, like this leader in the early church in the forum. But he said this: when it comes to these chief things that might actually distract us from the sole heart of knowing Jesus. He says, we must remember that we deal with a crafty enemy. If we were suddenly aware of a serpent nestling in our bed, we would go to great lengths to kill it. But when the devil nestles in our souls, we tell ourselves we are in no danger, and thus we lie at ease. I think a lot of us are happy with our religion. We're happy with the constructs we're facing. We're lying at ease and not knowing that this good thing is actually the serpent in our bed, that we love our religion and our rules and the structure and the things that give us a surety more than even the mysteries of Christ and the things he wants to do in your life. You build more affection and longing for the patterns and the things that bring you that comfort rather than the God who gives you that comfort and makes that comfort available. And so in that way, like, you might go to church your whole life and still live an eternity without Jesus because you haven't gotten to know him, because you don't love him, because you care more about the superstition or the religion of the day than you do about him. You know, and it just sneaks in. It's a serpent lying quietly in your bed. You don't know it's there. And I think for all of us, even if you're in, like, it's just so easy to fall into this trap. It's so much easier to build our affections for a system that we like, in a group of people that we like, who believe the same things we do, and it becomes this cultural thing that we just love to sit in. But it's not actually knowing and building affection for the God of the universe who loves you. And in that way, it's a quiet temptation. The temptation of religion might be the temptation you face the most. It might not be hard sins. It might not be falling in all sorts of ways. You might be graceful and elegant. You might be able to hold it together. You might not have these big seated sins and issues in your life. And it might be really easy to look at other people and say, oh man, they don't have it together, but I do. I'm good enough. And it becomes this pious place of resentment even sometimes for others. The longings you have aren't for your children to know Jesus. It's for them to follow the religious structure that you did. The longings you have are for, the wins you have are for people coming to church. Sure, that's a win. The greatest win, though, is that they come to know Jesus, because our churches are filled with people who don't know him and who don't love him. And my heart would be that you don't fall into the trap like these people do, where they think they know better than the God of the universe who's coming in and saying, no, I am here. It's not about where I come from, even though I was prophesied to come from Bethlehem and I've done that. It's about who I am. And so Jesus proclaims to these people, he actually responds to them. He says, as he taught in the temple, he says, you know me, sure. He's like, you know who I am. You know where I come from. He's like, you know where I come from here. You know that I come from Bethlehem. I was raised in Nazareth, spent a little bit of time in Egypt. You know some of these things about me. He's like, but you don't know this. And this is the key of who Jesus is. This is a much bigger picture of who Jesus, and we're going to get into some solid doctrine here around the Trinity of God, who God is, God the Father, the Son, the Spirit, what this means for our lives, and knowing what this relationship looks like. This is a huge component of what Jesus is about to say. He says, but I have not come of my own accord. This is like astonishing to me. You see, Jesus has this incredible moment here where he's saying, like, the reason I come is not by me and my own power. I'm not pushing my own agenda. I'm not moving myself narratively. He says there's actually something else. He says, he who sent me is true, and him you do not know. And this was like a wild statement, because remember where they are. They're in a festival right now where they're celebrating the goodness of a God they know. They're celebrating the providence of a God they know. They're looking back to historical accounts when they saw in their own group of people the Israelites know God actually has done something historically, literally, to guide us through the wilderness. Our forefathers, it's written, it's been spoken. They're meticulous in their writing down of these things. And so they say, I know. They think as they come to this festival, they know God. And Jesus is looking at them and saying, I've actually been sent by the one you think you know, and you do not know him. You don't know him. Now, what does this say about the Trinity? You see, this says that it actually wasn't Jesus' plan. It was God's plan to send Jesus here. He who sent me. So this is God who's sending Jesus, which unpacks a whole breadth of who Jesus is. And so for that, I actually want to look back into the beginning of John just for a second. If you turn with me there, chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. This means eternally, the Word was with God in the beginning, before time. Jesus existed with God together in perfect relationship, in perfect harmony, this beautiful relationship they had, and the Word was God. This is saying that Jesus was God for eternity, before the world existed, before all of these things. Jesus and God are absolutely equal. Jesus is God. And all things were made through him. Jesus was intimately involved in creation. And without him, not anything was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. It's this beautiful thing where Jesus was actually with God for eternity. Move to verse 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. You see, there's this beautiful thing where it's like we have Jesus coming to earth incarnationally through Mary, right? This immaculate conception, this beautiful thing where Jesus is born of a Virgin Mary and now lives. This God who existed forever comes into the history of the world and actually steps into it. But he does it, why? Because he was sent. This tells us that Jesus, though he was equal with God in eternity, this perfect relationship, for the sake of salvation, humbled himself to the plan of the Father so that we might find salvation, so that we could be saved, so that he could be sacrificed. Like Jesus submitted to the Father's plan for his life. You know, all throughout the Bible, all throughout the New Testament, there's these beautiful pictures that once God was actually flesh, when Jesus came to earth, we start to actually see what it's like to have God among us. And Jesus becomes this model even for us to actually strive towards and live unto and understand how he would function in different situations, how he shows grace and how he shows truth, how he loves people unconditionally, how he spends time with the people that others would consider less than or worse or far off, or people that are too dirty to spend time with. They wouldn't want to spend time with them. And we see Jesus do all these things. But one of the things we don't spend enough time thinking about is the way that Jesus submitted himself to the Father's plan. Just picture this for a second. Jesus is God, equally God. I think sometimes we picture this where it's like we have this tiered system of like importance in the church, where we have God the Father, who's this overlying arcing power of everything. And then we have Jesus, who's like not equal to. And then we have the Spirit, who's like someone we can call upon and ask when we need help with, but we don't really talk to him as much. But it's like, this is saying Jesus is equal, but then chose to submit to the Father's plan, that in good relationship, there's submission. I did a wedding this weekend, and I've done a lot of weddings, but this is maybe my favorite one. You see, this couple couldn't be more different than each other. Like, this one girl is super social, loves to hang out with everybody, loves to talk. This other guy is the most introverted, like incredible man, but loves time by himself. And my wife and I got to do premarital with them. And this was the one thing that just kept coming back, was like their differences and the tension sometimes those differences can create. So it was important they communicate well. It was important that they learn to talk about what they need and share what they need. It's important that they know what each other's love languages are so they can satisfy those wants and longings in each other's life. But one of the things that we talked about the most was this picture of co-submission. Like, I looked at the husband, I said, if you want to be a good husband under Jesus, like, your call is to love your wife by dying for her, like dying to yourself like Christ did for the church. It's this call that the Bible puts on you to actually submit all of your longings, your desires, your wishes, so that you would be less than your wife, so that you could raise her up to be all that God intends for her to be. And in that same passage, it's interesting that it actually looks to the wife as well. And this is like language that everybody omits from their wedding ceremonies now. Like, they don't want to say this idea of like, I will obey or I will submit. Like, it's just not in the vows anymore, right? Like, you just don't have it sitting there. It's not like, it used to be like do you take this woman to be your wife to have, or to be your husband, this man to be your husband, to have and to hold, for better or for worse, for rich or for poor, in sickness and in health, to obey and to follow. It's like, that used to be in there, but not anymore. Like, that line has just been crossed out. Nobody likes it. It doesn't work. It doesn't fit with our culture. It doesn't fit with our narrative. But like, it's actually like, look at it in the context of the other verses. It's beautiful. It just told the husband to die to himself, to lower himself every day, to give up everything. And then it looks to the wife and says, hey, submit to your husband. It's like, oh, we don't like that. It's like, but that's actually a beautiful picture. These two people longing for oneness, like to actually seek and find the oneness in their relationship, submitting to each other, trying to fight over the lowest point so they can constantly be lifting the other person up to be all that God intends for them to be. And in this way, God had a plan for salvation to reunite humanity to him in this beautiful relationship, the one like we saw in the garden before Adam and Eve sinned. And he says that Jesus here submits to the Father's will. He's not less than in value, but he submits to achieve something. I heard this story like 7 years ago about this pastor who felt like he was an old, long Presbyterian pastor. They believed in infant baptism, and so he had been baptized as an infant, raised in the church, served Jesus faithfully for years and years and years and years and years. And then he retired, and there was a Baptist church that needed a preacher and asked him to come and preach with them. But the one thing they had is this difference in understanding of baptism, the secondary doctrine, this idea of like, hey, this baptism is important that you be baptized by immersion. You need to go ahead and do that if you want to serve us. And I think a lot of us sometimes get caught up in that if we come from other religious backgrounds, like where it's like, hey, I was baptized as an infant. Should I be baptized again now that I'm an adult? Like, is that something I should do? I'm now following Jesus. I wasn't obviously following Jesus as a baby. I grew up and went my own way, but now I really feel like I'm in a relationship with him and I want to serve the church. You see, this is where that man was, this old pastor, faithful, loved Jesus, knew more about him than any of these people he was like, who were putting these rules on him for. And he decided, though, that he would submit. And so this 80-something-year-old man walks into the water in Vancouver and gets baptized, even though he's been following Jesus his whole life. Like, what a humbling moment. But why did he do it? It's because he wanted to achieve something. It's because he felt called to actually serve these people that he was called to. And in this way, that's what our lives need to reflect. If we're going to take anything from Jesus, it's this beautiful idea that submission is the call on Jesus' life as he submits to the authority of the Father, and our call is to submit our authorities to Jesus. John Calvin says this: if we're not our own but the Lord's, it's clear to what purpose all our deeds must be directed. We're not our own. Therefore, neither our reason nor our will should guide us in our thoughts and actions. We are not our own. Therefore, we should not seek what is only expedient to the flesh. We are not our own. Therefore, let us forget ourselves and our own interests as far as possible. We are God's own. To him, therefore, let us live and die. We are God's own. Therefore, let his wisdom and will dominate all our actions. We are God's own. Therefore, let every part of our existence be directed towards him as our only legitimate goal. This is what Jesus did for us. He submitted to the Father's plan. He came to earth, lowered himself to be fully man, still fully God, lived a life we couldn't, went through all of this nonsense of trying to tell people who he was and proclaim who he was to an end that we're about to talk about, to a significance that we're about to step into. And then he went, though, and he humbled himself to the point of death, where he died on a cross, and he took all of our sin and shame and guilt, and he put it on himself, and in that moment, died to it. Like he died. Like God was put to death in this moment, but he didn't stay dead. He rose again, showing his power over all of those things. That he is great and he is gracious and he is loving and he is kind, but he's truthful. And he did all to give us the opportunity to step into a relationship with him. All for us to step under the authority of him, because stepping under his authority leads to thriving. Like Jesus' submission led to the opportunity for people to be reconciled to God once and forever. That if people would confess him as Lord and believe him to be true, that they would actually be able to be with him again for eternity, which is where Jesus takes us next. Jesus is saying, I know the one who sent me. I know him, for I come from him and he sent me. This is what we're talking about. You see, and this is where the Pharisees and the religious of the day start thinking like this is coming off the rails. He's saying he's God again. He's starting to blaspheme. He's starting to say things that we don't believe and we shouldn't let people be thrown aside for. We shouldn't let people try and believe like it's time to start doing that. So they're seeking to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. This again is the authority of Christ working in the functional time of the world. It's not his time yet, so it wouldn't go forward. They couldn't arrest him. And yet many of the people believed in him. You see, people were coming to believe in Jesus. Like they're actually starting to follow him and to trust him and to think maybe this is actually the Messiah. Like Jesus' life and what he's accomplishing, Jesus preaching and what he's saying, all of these things, there's something deep happening in the lives of some of the people, and yet in some of them it's not. You see, for some of them, yeah, they believe in him, but then for this other group of people, they're still asking the question, hey, like, is this actually him? They haven't taken that step to follow him. When the Christ appears, will he do more signs than this man has done? They're looking to him as a man, not as God, and that might be where you are. You might be looking at Jesus today as a man that you think is good, as a man, like, is this actually him? As a man of like, well, will he come back? And you're still asking these questions. You're sitting in this place where you feel like you have all the time in the world to continue in this train of thought. We see the Pharisees heard the crowd. Okay, they heard the crowd muttering these things about him, some believing, some not. Is he the Christ? Is he going to do more? When Christ comes, will he do more than this? And so they sent officers to arrest him. But Jesus says, and this is where it gets wild, and all of this starts to make crucial importance for the decision you make today, to the way you think today, to the things you consider today. Jesus said, I will be with you a little longer. Jesus is with us in the flesh, in this moment, in the text, and with humanity, in history. He's physically present with his people, and the power of presence in people's lives cannot be overstated. Like, Jesus is actually with people, and all throughout the Gospels, he's with people. You know, there's one moment in my life, I had this great teacher that I loved. Like, when I was falling in love with Jesus, I had these people in my life who were teachers that I felt like I could trust, and I was listening to a lot of like downloading podcasts and constantly listening. And one of these guys was John Piper, and like I don't know what you think about him as a teacher, but for me, he was deeply impactful in my understanding and my affection for Jesus, like my desire for who God was, my heart to actually follow him with my life. And there was this moment where he was teaching 1 Peter at a church here in Vancouver, and so a couple friends of mine, like Pastor Michael Chinchilla, Pastor Victor Maynard, we all went to this conference, and we're sitting literally front row center for his teaching on 1 Peter. We're like, spit on me, anoint me with your spit, which is weird. That's actually not biblical or a theology you should follow. And so we're in this place where it's like afterwards, there's hundreds of people gathered around him who want to talk to him. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be that fanboy who's like going up to him and being like, oh, I'm so thankful for you. But I did really want to say thank you. But it's so busy, so packed. So I went up and I made a plan, and I'm like, I'm going to actually just make sure that I just get the opportunity while he's here in person just to say thank you. So I go up to him, and finally after waiting my turn, tons of people around him, people kind of shoving and hitting his shoulders and stuff. And I'm like, hey man, I just wanted to thank you. You have no idea, what your teaching has done for my life and how it's impacted me. And all he said, he just looked at me and he said, you're welcome, man, bless you. And that was it. But the power that I felt in that moment wasn't because I was talking to somebody I deeply respected. It was because in that moment with hundreds of people around, he was just present with me. There's nobody else in the room. It was just us. And that to me showed a great deal of leadership. And it's a leadership that's biblically based in who Jesus is. He says, I'm going to stay with you a little longer. He says, I'm actually here. I'm actually present with you. He's with his people. And in the same way, even today, God desires to be close with you in like a manifest felt way. Like he desires to be present. Some of you might be praying for that you would feel his presence. But he's not far off. Like you might be going through something right now where you feel like God's far away. Like Jesus is not far off. The Spirit of God is not far off. Like when Jesus ascended into heaven, he sent his Spirit back to be with his people. He's so used to like even at a festival of booths, of tabernacles, like God with us, Emmanuel, God with us. One of Jesus' names comes to live among us and is with his people. He's there and he's present. And so for you today, maybe you're walking through things on your own and you don't follow Jesus. And today's the day you say, you know what, I actually want that presence. I want that person in my life. Because you don't have to go through all the things and wonders of life alone. Because Jesus is available to you. And that's something maybe we've heard. You see, Jesus is saying though, I'm going to go back to the one who sent me. He said, you'll seek me and you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come. That sounds different from other things we may have heard from Jesus, but he continues because the Jews actually respond to this. The Jews say to one another, where does this man intend to go that we won't find him? Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? Are these the things that he plans on doing? What does he mean by saying, you'll seek me and you will not find me? Where I am, you cannot come. You see, some of us have been pitched an idea of Christianity that Jesus is always available to us, just waiting and knocking constantly for all of time, just waiting and knocking at the door of our hearts, waiting. But this text says something different. This text says that Jesus is going somewhere that you cannot come. The people who do not believe in him cannot come. This is so different from John, like chapter 14, where he's talking to his disciples and says, hey, I'm going to a place and I'm going to prepare a room for you and I'm going to come back for you, like people who love him. He's talking to people who do not see him as God, who do not know him as God, who do not respect and value and give him authority as God. And he's saying, I'm going somewhere and you're not going to come. Like this is wild. This is a warning text. This is the idea and the contrast to what you may have been spoken, that you can for your whole life go off and do whatever you want. Go off and take whatever you want, enjoy whatever you want, do whatever you want, follow your own desires, your own heart, everything that you want to do, and Jesus will always be there waiting for you. And some of us deal with our sin this way, where it's like, I'm tempted to this thing, I'm not gonna fight it because I know Jesus' grace is available to me. Some of you who are like living and you've been in the church before and you used to follow him and you feel like you've backslidden, you're like, you know what, but I know he's always there for me when I need him. You're in practically, you're in moments, the only time you pray to God is when you're going through something hard and you need him. Well, Jesus is saying there's going to be a moment in history at the end of your life where he's going somewhere and you will seek me and you will not find me. That is terrifying. This is the idea of spending an eternity away from the God who designed the universe, designed it to be good, wants you to be in it, but it's been marred by sin. An eternity separated from Jesus and the goodness of him. Like, that's what it looks like. Like this emotional tearing for the rest of time, that like you're seeking him. You're seeking the goodness of who God is. You're seeking and you're wondering who that is, where he is. You're seeking and wondering like how you can be close to him. All the good things that come from him, all the common graces that disappear when you followed him, you haven't followed him. It's like there's a theology where C.S. Lewis talks about this and he says like, hell is more than anything else. It's like the eternity without God is where people have chosen their whole lives that they don't want him, they don't want him, they don't want him. And throughout their lives, God has been faithful and showing up, yes, and knocking and saying, I'm here, I'm available for you, I've already sacrificed for you, I love for you. And then finally one day he just said, and after being rejected for someone's whole life, finally he says, okay. And he gives them what he wants. He gives them what they want. People who have no desire to be with God here will have no desire to be with God for eternity, but it's not like this. All the common graces disappear. It'll put you in a place for eternity where you're seeking to find Jesus and you won't find him. And none of us know when that will be. None of us know when the last day of our life will be. None of us know the moment when that's just it. Death and judgment. That's what comes. You see, Jesus is standing here and telling people who he is, that he's God. His desire, his will is that all people would believe in him and love him and follow him. The reason Jesus submits to the Father's plan is because it's important to him that he would give people an opportunity to be in relationship with him. And that opportunity is sitting before you today. And if you're in a place where you know about Jesus, it's not good enough. You need to know him. You need to love him. You need to build affection for him. You need to give your authority to him. You need to submit to his plan and his will for your life. It's not going to be a religion that saves you. It's not going to be the patterns that save you. It's not going to be the good deeds you do that save you. There's a lot of good people in this crowd. It's going to be only Jesus who paves the way for you to be with him for eternity. So if this is something that you have not engaged with, this train of thought, this idea that there will be a moment when it's too late, I encourage you not to get distracted from this question of who Jesus is. Do you believe him to be God? Do you believe him to be the one who holds all keys to salvation, the one who paid for your sin in a way that he didn't deserve, where he was murdered because of our sin for the sake of reconciling us to God, but that he's powerful and he rose again? That like if you're still breathing right now and you're hearing this message, I have confidence that Jesus is doing something in your life. Because right now he's talking to you and he's saying like, I don't want you to be in this place. Like, He's telling them the truth of what will happen in the end of not following and loving him. But his desire is that you would choose to follow him. That's why he goes to the cross. That's why he continues his journey. We're 6 months out from the death of Jesus, and he keeps walking towards the cross because he cares that you might follow him. He cares that you might love him and build your affection for him. He cares that you would know he is God, and that is what you would base your life and your understanding of the world, so that you would never be in a place for eternity where you seek him and you will not find him. I pray that wouldn't be true for anyone in my life, anyone in our church, anyone in the world. Would they come to know Jesus? Would they find him? And would it be a different understanding of who he is as God? Because it's that important. Where he's going, you cannot come. That's a scary text. And so if this is you today, I urge you, step into this relationship with Jesus. Deeply consider the things of Christ. Ask the doubtful questions. Ask the things that are holding you back. Get in good community where people can spur you on to him. Christians in the room who are following religion more than you're following Jesus, reassess that. As you worship today, actually consider what it looks like to step into your own relationship with Jesus. Not the relationship that your parents had with him or your church has with him. Because at the end of all things, Jesus isn't gonna stand there and say, what church did you go to? Did you speak in tongues? Did you not speak in tongues? He's not gonna ask these things. He's gonna ask, what did you do with me and the words that I spoke to you? What did you do with the word that became flesh and dwelt among us? What did you do with my sacrifice, with my resurrection, with my ascension, with the power I sent back to you through the Holy Spirit? What did you do with the person I am? What did you do with that information? Did you sit on it waiting, thinking that one day you might, but then you never did? Or did you accept fully Jesus as God today? And so, Jesus, we thank you that you love us and that you give us the opportunity to be in a relationship with you. That you spoke real words about what it would look like to live without you, a constant yearning and seeking, but never finding. But today, all of us who have breath have the opportunity to repent of our sin, to confess you as Lord, and then to live for eternity in your presence, with you physically with us. And so I pray for those of us who haven't questioned this in a long time, who haven't wondered if religion has taken the seat of Christ in our lives, or for those of us who had never wondered about Jesus at all. Would you, Holy Spirit, do what you do and transform and change lives? Would you help people fall in love with you? Would you build our affections for you? Would you help us disciple one another unto you? Would you do all the work that we cannot do, because you're the one who accomplishes and transforms us? And so we just pray that this would hold true for us, that we would one day, like you talked to your disciples, and that one day we would know you're preparing a room for us, that our excitement for heaven would be based on you, and that we today would give our lives to you in a new way that would transform us now and for forever. And we pray this in your powerful name. Amen.
When I survey the wondrous Christ on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss, in poor contempt on all my pride. Forbidden, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my God. All the vain so rich a crown. Of nature mine, that were enough, freeing far too small, love so amazing, so divine. Demands my soul, my life, my all. Love so amazing, so divine. Demands my soul, my life, my all.
What a powerful time of worshiping our King Jesus together. And my hope and prayer is that this would be the starting place to take this into your week. Grow closer as a fully devoted follower of Jesus wherever you're at. And we would love to come alongside you and help you do just that. You can go to thisisvillagechurch.com/connect with us because we would love to connect with you. And none of this would be possible without your financial partnership. And if you would like to partner with us, you can do so by going to thisisvillagechurch.com/give. Thanks so much for joining. We'll see you next time.
love.